Doing a little more tying today. Alex Lafkus here. This is kind of a beat up example of what we're going to tie today. Not tied perfectly. I was probably busting them out. It's the old school Mad Pop. This one has bead chain eyes on it. The one I'm going to tie is going to have small lead eyes on it. So we're going to start this with just a shank out of the back, like I've been doing. You know, you can tie it to wiggle or not. It might just be in my head, but it does seem like I've done, let me adjust this real quick. It does seem like I've done better on them where they are stiff and connected, but that could very well be in my head. The Mad Pup is a fly that was developed by Mark Sedotti out on the East Coast, who was one of the first guys to really bring the big streamer stuff to Michigan. Russ called him when Russ was catching these great big lake runs out. Well, they weren't lake runs at the time because he was catching them out in Lake Michigan, and kings and steelhead walking the beaches. So he called Mark because Mark was interested in giant brown trout. So Mark came up and they got to know each other, and Mark was a phenomenal tyer for striped bass, and then they went to the river trying that stuff and it worked. This is a fly, so the first thing I'm doing is grabbing the sculpin tails. These came off a whiting rooster neck or rooster saddle because I still have one in black. But, you know, you can use your Chinese strung or whatever you want to do that. And we're just going to lay these in here. So Mark tied this fly initially for striped bass, and it was to imitate a sand eel, which I know a lot of the bait fishermen out there do fish that sand eel. So he had tied this to fling off the beaches on the East Coast to fish for stripers and whatnot. So when Russ started fishing this up here, I remember a day in particular. I think the first day I fished with him with this fly, we ran Smith the Connors in an ensemble boat. So this is hundreds of years ago in December. I bet this was over 20 years ago. Now I'm just grabbing another piece of sculpin to tie in and wrap here. But I remember we beat him up, and Russ is still kind of the same way, where he takes one of everything he thinks might work. And we caught him really good for a while, and then he got bit off by a pike. I think he actually caught a sucker on it too that day. And it was like, why did a sucker eat a streamer? But we beat him up pretty good, and that was kind of the end of that. I was like, okay, gonna need some of those. So all I'm doing now is just wrapping a little bit of this sculpin, thicker, more webby stuff into here just to kind of give us a taper out the back. And then we're just going to go about attaching the shank to the hook. This is a 20 mil shank, I believe. Yeah, it's because it's still out of that one pack I have of a bunch of them. But anyway, so Mark tied this for a sand eel, and when we started fishing it for trout, it seemed like about the perfect. I don't know why. Doesn't look like a ton, but boy, I've had some days on it. And I've had days on it everywhere. You know, like I've had years in Arkansas where it was like I just couldn't have enough of them. Now we're going to the 1/0 B10S, or not 1/0, pardon me. I don't go over a size 1. I don't like the hook gauge once we get there. So this is a size 1. And I've had years up here, and then I've had years where I haven't really caught them on it. So, you know, whether or not it's the day or I didn't try it when I should have, or fished it through the wrong section that had no fish, who knows what it is. But, you know, I always kind of I'm going to make sure I have them regardless. Well, now we're just going to get this secured on here. I'm going to hit this with Sally Hansen's. And then when I do that, I'm going to go ahead and add my lead eyes. Once again, I'm kind of staggering this up. I don't think I'm going to put any real body material on this today. I think we're going to do the standard buck hair out the back. I don't know that I'm going to wrap anything in between. I don't think we're going to need it. You can always put some sort of filler on there if you want. I don't know how many of you guys have seen these. This is the old pack. Lead eyes, small, yellow, black. So we're going to put those on there. You know, I do a lot more with smalls and extra smalls. I used to run mediums more, and I've kind of gotten off of that. I think the mediums are just a little bit too much for what I typically do. There are times, though, when the white's running high, but a lot of times when I'm down there, you know, if I have clients gunning this stuff and it starts getting windy, I just know if they can just fling their line with even a bead chain, they're able to give it longer pauses and stalls. So I kind of prefer that over going real heavy. I will say when that thing gets really high, it has a lot of pace. I think if it's over 6 units, it's like 4 to 5 mile an hour current. You know, so when that's the case, having something with a little bit more lead will help. But obviously there's days when they're up on edges killing things, but for every day you have like that, you got about 5 that they're not. And that's where it pays to, you know, kind of mix it up. So I'm just going to go ahead and add my eyes there. So you're just giving yourself some room to add the wool head I'm going to put on. The Sally Hansen's probably isn't extremely dry, but it's probably dry enough. So now I'm going to go in and use some of this not so good bucktail that I have, because all of a sudden it feels like every olive bucktail I have is kind of junk. You know, you can kind of see it's really long tips, not whatever. It's more about me than it is about the fish caring about it. But usually when it's like that with the longer tips, it doesn't flare as well, so I might just have to manipulate it with some thread to get it to do what I want it to do. So my first couple chunks of buck hair are just going to be, you know, kind of tapering it back. Yeah, see how it doesn't want to flare at all? So I'm going to have to just kind of peel it out, which, whatever, it's going to be fine. I'm really using this just to get this mottled coloration going up. You'll notice it's, you know, I'm on the, yeah, it won't flare at all. Oh well. But it's gonna, so I'm doing black and olive, you know, that's kind of the typical deal here. That buck hair is, you know, it's just not going to soak up any water or anything, so it's going to not be too bad. So I'm just going to do a little chunk, but boy, it does not flare. Whatever. It's going to fish fine. It's going to fish fine. But it's probably about time to go drive around about 6 different fly shops and try to find a few olive bucktails that'll work. This one would be fine for reverse tying. You know, it's just not hollow, which is fine when I'm reverse tying. A lot of times I'm just going to throw, you know, craft fur over it too if I don't like how it looks. So, whatever. But for this stuff, I do like it a little bit more hollow, just so it will flare a little and give me a little better look back there, but we're not getting that, so whatever. Then I'll just come in on the bottom, measure up the tips. Now we'll get it to, there we go, that's about right. Now, years ago, this fly was with a company called Pacific Fly, which, you know, I think had Russ's original like circus peanuts and krakens, and actually I know they did. The fly they had though was tied with a rabbit tail, and that might have been Russ's paranoia, which is understandable. But the feather tail has always kind of been the one that has worked best for me. The rabbit did give it a pretty good swim, but, and I've tied this in a lot of different colors, but it just seems like this is the color combo that I've always done the best on. All right, so there we got kind of our back section done. Excuse me. Now I'm going to go in and we're going to do a little more bucktail up at the front. And this is just kind of to create that taper going back. And then we're going to do a wool head on it. So, once again, wool. But, you know, wool's easy to use. It gives you that nice little blocker head that, I mean, it soaks up a little water, but as long as you keep it tight, it doesn't ever get too heavy. So then, now we're going to come in here. This is where I wish it was a little more hollow because it would flare, but it's going to be fine. Just lay it there. Getting a little flare out of it. But I want to keep some room here because I am, oh yeah, that's going to be fine. Because I'm going to start putting in that wool right there. You know, actually I'm going to do one more slop and feather just to give it that mottled look again. And it'll also help, that's one thing that, you know, Russ is always kind of big on. It kind of fills in that little gap, so it kind of creates a little more uniform drawback as it goes back. So whatever. And I'm using my super heavy thread here, my Danville 210, which, well, it's a lot, but it with this bucktail, this is, you know, not great, and it's getting a little flare out of it because it is super thick. I do have some clients that have been on board with me when some of this stuff was whipping on them, and I'll tell you, the guys I had on those days, they don't leave home without it now. So it's, I mean, it has its days. And that's, you know, a lot of times I got one guy in the boat, and that's fine if I'm fishing a little river, but when I go to the bigger rivers, man, it is nice to have a couple guys gunning, because, you know, I can play around with it too, and I can give a guy A, B, or C to play with it. And if I got one guy catching them on one thing, I can always, you know, mix that other guy up. I usually, like 99% of the time, they're not running the same fly. In Arkansas, maybe a little more, just because, you know, it's such a big river and the way those fish are kind of programmed. So sometimes I notice it where both guys can run that same bait and both catch fish, but a lot of times I'm always like, figure out something else that works. Okay, so now we're going to come back and wrap this stuff in here. Just, okay. So there. Back half looks almost like a single deceiver or cockroach, you know, tarpon fly at this point. Now I'm going to go to that little piece of black feather I got here. Just get it modeled again. You know, we kind of went black, olive. Now we're going to go to the a little more black to kind of fill this in. And this is just really a collar, like, you know, a lot of other flies, you just putting a collar in there to mix it up a little bit. this is another one that like I've always basically tied with just no shank off the back. You know, I'm just only reason it's there is to try to help keep that marabou or that feather tail away to not foul. All right, there we go. We're getting there. Okay, now next step is going to be wool. The original, which has caught a lot of fish, was tied, from what I remember, I can't be 100% certain, it's been a minute, and was with a white, olive, and black head. So we're gonna do the white and olive and black. I will say one nice thing is when you're running this type stuff and you put a white head on it, man, it gives you a way to track. So like even on the cloudiest, nastiest day out there, you got an idea where that fly is. And you don't always need to know where it is, but by keeping a kind of a close look on it or having an idea, you're just able to fish so much more effectively. So it is nice to be able to have some sort of thing to track it with, and this white wool will help you there. You know, you can feed it a little bit deeper and then pop it out. You know, it's okay to lose sight of your fly on occasion. That's not bad at all. But I like to kind of keep an eye on it, you know, so I can fish it more effectively around structure and around habitat a lot of the times. So if I'm just dipping that, if I've got that white head, I can let it kind of fall out of sight and then pop it back up. A lot of times, you know, like most predators, the big ones don't want to break that change in the color, you know, where you'll be fishing and you'll notice there's like a certain depth that you lose visual contact with stuff. A lot of times that's where those big fish are most comfortable, and they don't want to come out of that line. So, you know, having the fly with the white head on it, where you can kind of feed it into that zone and pull it back out, it does help. It really does help. Get a couple wraps there. Boom, boom, boom. This white wool is a little knotty, but whatever, we'll make it work. Just try to fluff it out as you go. That way you're not losing a bunch when you go to trim it off. Okay. Now we'll get on a little bit more color. This black wool feels way better. Now, olive's a little crinkled, so we're just going to brush that out. I don't know how well you saw that, but it's pretty crinkled. I'm just going to go ahead and lay that right on top of the eyes. I got the olive and the black in there. And that is going to just break up that head color a little bit more for me. You know, kind of sticking with the same theme of the whole fly, where it's a lot of mottled. You know, black, olive, white, black, olive, white. I don't know. That seems like about the three best trout colors in my mind. Maybe missing a little yellow, but whatever. So we got that, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of white underneath the eyeballs. Just get it in there a little bit, like say. Just so we cover up that bottom there, like say. There we go. And we'll just kind of wrap it back to make sure it's gonna stay there. Pull out some of that loose stuff there. This is all just gonna make it easier when you go in to trim it too. Ooh, lost a chunk there. But by wrapping back over it, you'll be able to keep more of it in there. Oh, we'll just give it a little more. Oh, one more decent chunk up front, I think. Plenty. And then we get to trim it, which makes a total mess. But it's gonna go well because my entire fly tying table is an absolute disaster. There is everything from fly tying materials for wet skunks and hoppers to sparkle minnows and yeah, everything. Flash deceivers. I mean, it's a real treat right now. That's probably gonna be a afternoon project, because if I don't do it now, I'm gonna lose my mind soon, which I'm always kind of teetering on the edge anyway, so we gotta do our best to maintain at least. All right, there we go. Oh man, that's the guy. Get our little whip finishes in here. Well, I'm gonna hit this with the Sally Hansen's now too. When you're dealing with wool, I do like to kind of glue it before I trim it, because at this point, you know, I've got the ability to pull the wool back and kind of keep it out of the way so that I can just kind of, you know, get it where I want it. The second you start trimming it, well, you know, it's kind of like egg yarn, so it's gonna just pop and go everywhere. Here you go, a few little dabs all around. Give her a second to kind of dry. And then, you know, like on that other video I did with, like, I think I call it the wool nut or whatever, a little circus peanut with a wool head. Kind of showed you how to trim that wool, and I mean, for how much is on this hook right now, there ain't gonna be much left. So I'm gonna go in, and like the first thing I usually do is try to trim it loosely around those eyes, you know, kind of flat on the sides. And just a little bit at a time. I'll go to the other side and do the same. I don't know how well you can tell, but I'm just trying to get it kind of flat along those eyeballs. I'll start kind of giving it a little sculpin-y head. Trim it back a little bit at a time. You know, that's always the safest bet when you're trimming product. You never put it back on. Well, you can, but And it's kind of a slow process, but you know, whatever. The fly's pretty quick. So if you spend a little extra time doing this, you're still coming out ahead, I feel like. But this was one of the, you know, if I were to go back, like, this is one of the first flies we really fished a ton that was, you know, that next size up. You know, like after we'd kind of proceeded into the circus peanut, the kraken, you know, that sort of stuff. This was kind of like the next 4 to 5 inch deal that we were running a ton. Those were kind of the really the first, I'd say 3 of the sculpin type stuff that was just a little bigger. You know, so much was tied on single hooks prior to that it really did start, you know, kind of changing. And this was one of those original ones. And then of course the big bait fish, which was, you know, one of Sedotti's, the Sedotti Slammer, which is an awesome fly. It was a great fly. You know, the only issue you had with it was it, in order to get it to swim perfectly, like he got his to swim, Mark did, it was a couple hooks that didn't work great for trout, and it was a wire connection, and it was a stiff wire connection, which made it tough. The second you'd stick a fish on that back hook, they'd never swim the same again. And every time Russ went fishing with me, we'd end up losing one to a pike every day. And that was always sad. But there you go. That's basically your Mad Pup. See, I can keep that head. And you can always trim it how you want it. You know, if you want to go a little smaller. Just kind of keep it flat there. But that's the old school Mad Pup, man. That thing is a pretty sweet deal. Small lead eyes, feather tail, easy to cast. But that's him. I don't know, something else to add to your arsenal. Fly shops ought to thank me for this. I'm getting you guys using all sorts of weird stuff. A lot of wool. Now you need a white patch too. So whatever. Hope you enjoyed that, guys. Don't forget, like, subscribe. It all helps me and keeps me motivated to continue to do this because, well, motivation helps. Thanks.